She looked me straight in the eye, sat down in my seat, and said, "Honey, I don't think this seat belongs to you." I had exactly $47 in my bank account. I had not slept in 2 days. And I was flying to the one interview that could save my entire life. So when this woman tried to take my seat, she had no idea who she was messing with. Stick with me till the end because what happened next on that plane changed everything for me. Hey, before I get into this story, let me just say, I never thought I'd be sharing something this personal on the internet. But I promised myself that if I ever got through this chapter of my life, I would tell the truth about it. No sugar coating. No pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. My name doesn't really matter for this story. What matters is what I went through to get on that plane. So let me take you back a little bit. You might be wondering how a grown woman ends up fighting over an airplane seat, like it's the end of the world. Trust me, by the end of this video you'll understand. I'm from a small town. Nothing fancy. My parents worked hard their whole lives, and honestly, we never had much. Growing up, I watched my mom stretch $10 to feed a family of 5 for 3 days. I watched my dad take double shifts at the factory just so we could have new shoes for school. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you this because it shaped who I became. It shaped how hard I was willing to fight for the little things I had. And that seat on the plane? That wasn't just a seat. That was everything I had left. So here's where the real story starts. 2 years ago, I lost my job. Not because I was bad at it. The company just closed down. One day I was working. The next day gone. No warning. No severance. Nothing. I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot after they told us, just staring at the steering wheel thinking, what do I do now? I had rent due in 11 days. I had a car payment. I had a mother back home who depended on me sending her a little money every month because my dad's health wasn't good anymore. You ever have that feeling where your chest gets tight and you can't even cry because you're too scared to cry? That was me. Every single day for months. I applied to over 200 jobs. I'm not exaggerating. 200. I kept a spreadsheet. I know that sounds intense, but when you're desperate, you track everything. You have to. Out of those 200 applications, I got maybe 12 interviews. And every single one of them ended the same way. We've decided to go with another candidate. We appreciate your time. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. I started to hate that phrase. Future endeavors. Like my future was just some inconvenience they were tossing back to me. I sold things I didn't want to sell. My grandmother's jewelry. My car, the one I loved, the one I'd worked 3 years to pay off. I moved into a smaller apartment, and when that got too expensive, I moved in with a friend and slept on her couch for 8 months. 8 months on someone else's couch, folding my blanket every morning so it wouldn't feel like I was overstaying my welcome. Even though she never once made me feel that way. That guilt, that shame. It was all in my own head. But it was real to me. And through all of this, I kept applying. I kept believing that somewhere out there, someone was going to give me a real chance. Then one morning, I got an email. A company, a good one, a real opportunity, wanted to fly me out for an in-person interview. Not a phone call. Not a Zoom call. An actual flight, an actual hotel, an actual face-to-face meeting for a position that would have changed my entire life. I remember reading that email 3 times because I didn't believe it was real. But here's the thing. They only covered the hotel, not the flight. I had to book my own flight and get reimbursed later, if I got the job. If I didn't get the job, I wouldn't see a single dollar of that money back. I looked at flights for 2 days straight, refreshing the page like it was going to magically get cheaper. The cheapest one I could find was still almost $400. I didn't have $400. I had a little over $500 total to my name, and that money was supposed to cover my rent that was already 2 weeks late. You might be wondering why I didn't just skip the interview. Trust me, the thought crossed my mind more than once. But something in me said, if you don't take this risk, you're going to sit here for the rest of your life wondering what if. So I did it. I booked the flight. I paid the $400. I texted my landlord and begged for a few more days on rent. I didn't sleep that night, or honestly most nights that week. I kept running numbers in my head. If I get this job, I can pay rent. I can pay my friend back for letting me crash on her couch. I can send money to my mom again. I can breathe again. That flight wasn't just a flight to me. It was a lifeline. It was maybe the last one I had. I remember packing my one good outfit, the only interview blazer I owned, ironing it on my friend's kitchen table at midnight, because I didn't want a single wrinkle in it. I remember standing in front of the mirror practicing my answers to interview questions, saying them out loud like a crazy person, because I needed this to go perfectly. The morning of the flight, I woke up at 4 a.m., even though my flight wasn't until 9. I couldn't sleep anyway. My stomach was doing flips. I remember standing at the airport counter checking in, and the woman at the desk smiled at me and said, "Traveling for business?" And I just smiled back and said, something like that. I didn't have the heart to tell her this flight was the difference between me surviving or completely falling apart. I paid extra, and I really scraped together every last cent for a specific seat, an aisle seat, close to the front, because my connecting flight was tight and I needed to get off that plane fast to make my connection, which would then get me to my interview on time. If I missed that connection, I would miss the interview completely. There was no other flight that day that would get me there in time. That seat wasn't a luxury. That seat was strategy. That seat was survival. So I get to the gate. I'm sitting there, bouncing my knee, going over my resume points in my head one more time. Boarding starts. I get on the plane. I find row 8, seat C. My seat. And there she is. A woman, maybe mid-40s, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head even though we were indoors, big shopping bags shoved into the overhead bin that clearly weren't hers to begin with because she took up 2 spaces. And she's sitting in my seat. Seat 8C. I double-check my boarding pass. Seat 8C. I look at the row number above the seats. Row 8. This is my seat. I say politely because that's just who I am. "Hi, I'm so sorry, but I think you're in my seat. I have 8C. And she looks up at me, slowly, like I had interrupted something very important, even though she was just scrolling on her phone. And she says, and I will never forget this, "Honey, I don't think this seat belongs to you. I always sit here. I'm sure there's another seat you can take." I actually laughed a little, not because it was funny, but because I was so confused. I said, "No, I paid extra for this specific seat. It's on my ticket." And I showed her my boarding pass. She barely even glanced at it. She just waved her hand and said, "There's probably some mistake with the airline. Just ask the flight attendant for another seat, sweetie. I have somewhere important to be after this flight, and I need the aisle for my knee. I have a medical condition." Now here's where I want to pause for a second, because you might be thinking, okay, maybe she really did have a medical condition. And normally, I would have some compassion for that. I really would have. But something about the way she said it, so casual, so entitled, like she expected me to just fold and walk away, it didn't sit right with me. I said, "I understand, but this is my assigned seat. I actually need it too. I have a very tight connection, and I need to be near the front to make it." She rolled her eyes, actually rolled her eyes at me, and said, "It's just a seat. It's not that deep. You have no idea, lady. You have absolutely no idea." I felt my face get hot. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the one I used to feel sitting in my car after losing my job. But this time, something in me shifted. I wasn't going to just shrink and disappear like I had so many times before. Not this time. Not on this flight. Not when everything, and I mean everything, was riding on me getting off this plane fast enough to make my connection. I said calmly but firmly, "I'm not going to argue with you. This is my seat. I paid for it. I need you to move." She scoffed and said something like, "Wow, some people have such an attitude these days," and turned back to her phone, completely ignoring me, like I was a fly she could just wave away. At this point, people around us started to notice. I could feel eyes on me. Some of you watching this probably know that feeling, standing in the aisle while other passengers try to board behind you, feeling like you're causing a scene just by asking for what's rightfully yours. I flagged down a flight attendant. My hands were actually shaking a little, not from fear, but from how exhausted and overwhelmed I was. I explained the situation calmly. I showed my boarding pass. The flight attendant looked at the woman and asked to see her ticket. And this is the part one still can't believe. The woman didn't even have a ticket for seat 8C. She had a ticket for seat 14E, a middle seat, near the back of the plane. She had just walked up to the front, saw an empty aisle seat before I boarded, and decided to sit there because, in her words when the flight attendant pressed her, I just didn't want to sit in the back, and I figured no one would really care. No one would really care. I wanted to scream. I didn't, because I'm not that person, but internally I was screaming. This woman had just tried to take something that wasn't hers. Not because she needed it, not because of any real emergency, but because she simply didn't feel like sitting where she was supposed to sit. And she assumed I would just quietly move because I looked like the type of person who wouldn't fight back. The flight attendant, very professionally, told the woman she needed to return to her assigned seat, 14E, because seat 8C belonged to me. The woman huffed. She actually huffed, like a child being told to clean their room. She grabbed her bags, bumped my shoulder on purpose walking past me, and muttered something under her breath. I didn't even catch all of it, but I heard the word ridiculous clearly. And you know what? I didn't say anything back. I didn't need to. I sat down in my seat. My seat. The one I had scraped together every last dollar for. And I just sat there for a second, hands shaking, heart pounding, and I felt this wave of emotion hit me that I was not expecting. I wasn't crying because of her. I want to be really clear about that. I was crying because of everything that seat represented. Every single sacrifice I had made to be sitting in it. Every ramen noodle dinner. Every night on my friend's couch. Every rejection email. Every moment I doubted myself. That seat was proof that I hadn't given up. And I wasn't going to let anyone, especially someone who thought entitlement was a personality trait, take that away from me. You might be wondering why this small moment on a plane hit me so hard. And honestly, I think it's because for the past 2 years, I had been letting things happen to me. Losing my job happened to me. Rejection after rejection happened to me. I felt like life was just something that was being done to me, and I had no control over any of it. But in that moment, on that plane, I realized something. I had control over this. I had earned this seat. And for the first time in a really long time, I stood up for myself instead of just accepting whatever someone else decided I deserved. That might sound small to you. It's just a seat, right? That's literally what she said to me. But it wasn't just a seat. It was the first time in 2 years that I chose myself. Now, you'd think that was the end of the drama, but honestly, the flight itself was the easy part. We landed, and I had exactly 19 minutes to make my connection. 19 minutes to get off the plane, run through the terminal, go through a security checkpoint at a different gate, and board another flight before the doors closed. I want you to understand, this wasn't just about making the interview on time. If I missed this connection, there was no other flight that day. The interview was scheduled for the next morning at 9 a.m. sharp. If I didn't make this flight, I wouldn't make the interview at all. So the second that seatbelt sign turned off, I grabbed my bag and I ran. I actually ran through that airport like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. My blazer, the one good outfit I owned, was getting wrinkled in my bag as I swung it around corners. I didn't care. I just kept running. I made it to my gate with 4 minutes to spare. 4 minutes. I collapsed into my seat on that second flight, completely out of breath, sweat on my forehead, and I just started laughing. Not because anything was funny, but because I couldn't believe I actually made it. That night, I got to the hotel around 11 p.m. I laid out my blazer, tried to steam the wrinkles out with a hot shower running in the bathroom. A trick my mom taught me years ago, because we never owned an iron that worked properly. I went over my notes one more time. I barely slept, again, but this time it was a different kind of sleeplessness. It wasn't dread. It was hope, mixed with fear, mixed with everything I had been carrying for 2 years. The next morning, I walked into that interview wearing the only blazer I owned, carrying 2 years of rejection, exhaustion, and a plain seat that I had fought for. And something in me felt different. I wasn't walking in there desperate anymore. I was walking in there like someone who had already proven, just hours earlier, that she wasn't going to let anyone push her out of what was hers. I answered every question with a confidence I didn't even know I still had in me. I talked about the gap in my resume honestly. I didn't try to hide it or make excuses. I just told them the truth, that I had been through a hard 2 years, that I had applied to over 200 jobs, that I had shown up for every single interview I got, and that I was still standing. 3 days later, I got the call. I got the job. I remember exactly where I was standing when my phone rang. I was in my friend's kitchen, the same kitchen where I ironed my blazer at midnight. I saw the area code and my stomach dropped. I answered, and the woman on the other end said, "We'd love to offer you the position." And I couldn't speak for a second. I had to ask her to repeat herself because I genuinely thought I misheard. I hung up the phone and I just sat down on the kitchen floor and cried. Really cried. 2 years of built-up exhaustion and fear and shame just came pouring out of me. Right there on my friend's kitchen tile. I know this video is called "She Tried to Steal My Seat on the Plane," and I know a lot of you clicked on this expecting some dramatic airport showdown, maybe security getting involved, maybe some big viral confrontation. And I get it, that moment on the plane was intense. But honestly, that woman is such a small part of this story now. I don't even think about her much anymore. What I think about is what that moment taught me. It taught me that I had spent 2 years shrinking myself, apologizing for taking up space, accepting rejection after rejection without ever pushing back, letting people, situations, life in general, just walk all over me because I was too tired and too broken down to fight. That woman on the plane wasn't the real lesson. The real lesson was realizing that I still had a fight left in me. That even after everything, after losing my job, after sleeping on a couch for 8 months, after 200 rejections, I still had the strength to say, "No, this is mine. I earned this. And I'm not moving." And once I found that strength for something as small as a plane seat, I realized I could apply that same strength to everything else in my life. To negotiating my salary at that new job, something I never would have done before. To finally telling my landlord I needed a payment plan instead of just panicking in silence. To calling my mom and being honest about how hard things had been instead of pretending everything was fine, because I didn't want to worry her. That plane seat cracked something open in me. It reminded me that I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to say no. I am allowed to stand my ground. Even when someone bigger, louder, or more entitled tries to tell me I don't deserve what's mine. I've been at that job for over a year now. I moved into my own apartment again. I finally paid my friend back for letting me stay on her couch, though she told me I never owed her anything, which honestly made me cry all over again. I send my mom money every month, and now it's not out of desperation, it's out of love because I actually can. But every once in a while, when I'm sitting on a plane, I think about that woman. I think about how she looked at me and just assumed I would fold. I think about how many times in my life I probably would have folded before that day. And I think about how grateful I am that I didn't. If you're watching this right now, and you're going through something hard, whether it's losing a job, feeling like you're drowning in bills, feeling invisible, feeling like life keeps taking things from you without ever giving anything back, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to fight for your seat. Whatever that seat represents in your life. A job. A relationship. Your own self-respect. Your own worth. Don't let anyone, no matter how confident or entitled they seem, convince you that you don't deserve what you worked for. I'm not saying be cruel. I'm not saying be aggressive. I stayed calm that entire time on that plane. But calm doesn't mean weak. Calm doesn't mean giving up. You can be soft-spoken and still refuse to move. You can be polite and still stand your ground. That woman thought I was an easy target. Someone tired, someone stressed, someone who looked like she'd just apologize and walk to the back of the plane. She had no idea what I had been through to get to that seat. She had no idea how much I had already survived just to be sitting there. And honestly, I think a lot of us are underestimated like that every single day. People see us tired, see us struggling, and they assume we're easy to push around. But sometimes, the people who have been through the most are the ones who fight the hardest when it finally matters. So if today you're tired, if today you feel like giving up, if today someone is trying to take something from you that you worked hard for, I hope this story reminds you of something. You've survived 100% of your worst days so far. You are stronger than you think you are. And you are completely allowed to say, "This is mine. And I'm not moving." If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own fight, whatever that fight looks like for you, drop a comment and let me know. Tell me about a moment when you finally stood up for yourself, even when it was scary. I read every single one of them, and honestly, hearing your stories helps me just as much as sharing mine helps you. And if you want to hear more real stories like this one, hit that subscribe button, because trust me, this isn't the only fight I've had to win. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. I mean that. This story wasn't easy to tell, but I'm glad I finally did. I'll see you in the next video.